Millionaire tests his fiancée's love by saying he's bankrupt. Her reaction will shock you. And before we continue, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more gripping stories like this. Enjoy the story. The gentle hum of traffic far below was muffled by the thick glass windows of James Archer's penthouse. The city skyline stretched endlessly, its glittering lights a stark contrast to the heaviness in James's chest. He sat in the dining room, his perfectly tailored navy blue suit an emblem of his success. In front of him was a velvet box containing a diamond ring that would have made any jeweler gasp, a testament to the life he had built. Across the table, Amanda sat, her laughter soft and melodic, as she recounted a childhood story about her dog chasing the neighborhood mailman. She was radiant, her smile lighting up the room like a spark of warmth on a cold day. But James wasn't laughing. His mind was elsewhere, spiraling down a rabbit hole of doubt that had been growing for weeks. Amanda was everything he thought he wanted: intelligent, compassionate, and undeniably beautiful. Yet, as their engagement neared, an unsettling question had begun to gnaw at him. Was she truly in love with him, or the life he offered? James swirled the glass of wine in his hand, staring at the dark red liquid as if it held answers. He couldn't shake the memories of past relationships, people who claimed to love him but disappeared when his wealth wasn't on full display. It was the curse of being a self-made millionaire. His success was magnetic, but it often attracted the wrong kind of people. James. Amanda's voice broke through his thoughts. She tilted her head, her golden earrings catching the light. "You've been quiet all evening. Everything okay?" James forced a smile, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Sorry, I've just had a lot on my mind lately." Amanda reached across the table, her fingers brushing his. "Work stress again? You're always pushing yourself too hard." "Something like that," he murmured, avoiding her gaze. In truth, it wasn't the long hours or demanding clients that weighed on him. It was her, or rather, the unanswered question of her intentions. As the evening wore on, Amanda's laughter faded into the background of James's thoughts. He watched her as she sipped her wine, completely at ease in their lavish surroundings. The designer furniture, the marble floors, the priceless art on the walls, it was all a part of the life he had worked tirelessly to build. And yet, in moments like this, it felt like a barrier, separating him from the truth. "Amanda," he said abruptly, his voice cutting through the comfortable silence. She looked up, surprised. "Yes." James hesitated, the words heavy on his tongue. "Do you ever think about what life would be like if we didn't have all this?" Amanda frowned slightly, setting her glass down. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he continued, choosing his words carefully, "if I lost everything tomorrow, the company, the house, the cars gone, would you still want to be with me?" Her expression shifted. Confusion, then concern, then something else he couldn't quite place. "James, where is this coming from? Why would you even ask that?" He shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant. "It's just a thought I've been having. Hypothetically, if things were different, would we still work?" Amanda stared at him for a moment, as if searching for the right response. Finally, she said, "James, I love you. Not the house, not the cars. You. Why would you doubt that?" Her answer should have reassured him, but it didn't. It felt rehearsed, as though she had anticipated the question and prepared the perfect reply. James forced another smile, nodding as if satisfied. "Of course. You're right." The rest of the evening passed uneventfully, but James's thoughts remained turbulent. After Amanda had fallen asleep in his arms, he lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Her words replayed in his mind, but they felt hollow. Was it fair to doubt her? Was he projecting his own insecurities onto her? Or was there something deeper, something he couldn't see? As the moonlight streamed through the massive bedroom windows, James made a decision. He needed to know the truth, and the only way to find out was to test her. It was drastic, maybe even unfair, but the alternative, living with doubt, was unbearable. I have to know if this love is real, he whispered to himself, his voice barely audible over the hum of the city below. The morning sun crept through the floor-to-ceiling windows of James's penthouse, casting golden light over the pristine living room. Everything in the apartment was a symbol of his success. The sleek leather furniture, the abstract art adorning the walls, and the view of the bustling city skyline. Yet, none of it felt comforting. James sat on the couch, staring at his laptop screen with a tight jaw. The email he had just sent to his financial advisor was short but deliberate. Make it believable. I've lost everything. I'll handle the details later. He leaned back, exhaling deeply. This wasn't just a test for Amanda. It was a gamble with his own emotions. If she reacted poorly, it would confirm his worst fears. If she stayed, well, then he could finally let go of his doubts. His phone buzzed on the coffee table, interrupting his thoughts. It was Marcus, his former business partner, and one of the few people he trusted. Marcus's blunt voice crackled through the speaker when James answered. "This is a bad idea, James," Marcus said without preamble. "You're playing with fire." "I need to know," James replied, pinching the bridge of his nose. "I can't marry someone if there's even a chance she's here for the wrong reasons. And you think lying to her is the way to figure that out?" Marcus's tone was incredulous. "You're setting yourself up to lose either way. If she fails, you'll be heartbroken. If she passes, she might never forgive you for the lie." James sighed, his grip tightening on the phone. "She'll forgive me if it means we can build something real. You know what I've been through, Marcus. I can't let this go unchecked." There was a pause before Marcus finally said, "I'll help you. But don't come crying to me when this blows up in your face." By the time Amanda returned from her morning yoga class, James had already rehearsed the story in his mind a dozen times. She walked in, her cheeks flushed and her blonde hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. "You're up early," she said with a smile, setting her water bottle on the counter. "What's the occasion?" James forced a weak smile. "There's something I need to talk to you about." Her smile faltered as she picked up on the seriousness in his tone. She walked over to the couch and sat beside him, her brows furrowed. "What's wrong?" James took a deep breath, steeling himself. "Amanda, I've been keeping something from you. I didn't know how to say it before, but things have taken a turn for the worse. The business deal I was counting on fell through, and with it, everything else. I'm bankrupt." The words hung in the air like a dark cloud. Amanda stared at him, her mouth slightly open. "Bankrupt? James, what are you talking about? How could this happen?" "It was sudden," he said, trying to make the lie sound convincing. "A deal gone bad. Investments lost. I didn't want to worry you, but we're going to have to make some big changes. The house, the cars, the lifestyle. It's all at risk." Her face paled as she processed his words. "You mean, we might lose everything?" He nodded slowly, his stomach churning at her reaction. "Yes, we might have to start over." Amanda stood abruptly, pacing the room with her arms crossed. "This doesn't make any sense. How could something like this happen so quickly? Didn't you see it coming?" "I tried," James lied, "but some things are out of my control." She stopped pacing, turning to face him. Her eyes were wide with worry, but there was something else there. Something James couldn't quite read. "What does this mean for us?" Her question was like a dagger to his chest. He had hoped she would say something reassuring, something that would prove her love was unconditional. Instead, her uncertainty confirmed his deepest fears. "It means we'll have to adjust," he said carefully. "But I need to know, are you willing to stick by me through this?" Amanda stared at him for a long moment, her expression conflicted. "James, I love you, but this is a lot to process. I need time to think." Her words echoed in his mind as she walked out of the room, leaving him alone on the couch. James sat motionless, his heart heavy with disappointment. He had expected tears, maybe even anger, but not hesitation. Time to think. Wasn't love supposed to be unwavering, especially in moments of crisis? As the sun began to set, James remained on the couch, replaying their conversation in his head. Doubt gnawed at him, but so did guilt. Was this hesitation proof of her lack of love, or was it just a natural reaction to an overwhelming situation? He didn't have the answers, but one thing was clear. His plan was already setting events into motion that he might not be able to control. The hours that followed Amanda's retreat into the guest room were torturous for James. He paced the penthouse, his thoughts racing with doubt and frustration. The city's nighttime glow filtered through the expansive windows, casting long shadows across the pristine marble floors. He poured himself a glass of whiskey, hoping it would calm his nerves, but the burn in his throat did little to quiet the storm inside him. Amanda's reaction replayed in his mind like a broken record. "I need time to think." Those words were a dagger to his heart. He had anticipated something, anything other than hesitation. A declaration of love, perhaps, or even anger at the sudden shift in their circumstances. Instead, her need for space felt like an indictment of her feelings. Was this the proof he had feared? Or was he being too harsh, too cynical? By the time midnight rolled around, James had settled into the leather armchair in his study, the half-empty glass of whiskey resting on the table beside him. The soft glow of a desk lamp illuminated the room, but the shadows seemed to press in closer with each passing hour. He leaned back, closing his eyes, only to be jolted upright by a soft knock at the door. "James." Amanda's voice was quiet, almost hesitant. He sat up, his heart racing. "Come in." The door creaked open, and Amanda stepped inside, wrapped in a thick blanket. Her face was pale, her eyes rimmed with redness from crying. She looked smaller than he'd ever seen her, as if the weight of the evening had diminished her usual presence. She didn't sit down immediately, instead lingering near the door, clutching the blanket tightly. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. James nodded, gesturing to the chair across from him. "Of course." Amanda moved slowly, as though each step required careful thought. She settled into the chair, her eyes fixed on the floor. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was heavy, filled with unspoken fears and unanswered questions. "I've been thinking," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "about everything you said earlier." James leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. "And..." Amanda took a deep breath, finally lifting her gaze to meet his. "Before I say anything else, I need to tell you something. Something I've been hiding." A chill ran through him. This wasn't what he had expected. "What is it?" Her hands tightened around the edge of the blanket as she spoke. "Before I met you, I made some terrible financial decisions. Credit cards, loans, trying to keep up appearances. It all spiraled out of control. When we started dating, I didn't want you to see that side of me, so I hid it. But the truth is, I'm in debt, James. A lot of debt." James blinked, stunned. "Debt?" Amanda nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I've been trying to fix it, to pay it off little by little. But it's been hard. And now, with everything you told me tonight, I feel like I'm just dragging you down." Her voice broke on the last word, and she quickly wiped her eyes with the corner of the blanket. James sat back, the weight of her confession sinking in. This wasn't what he had been prepared for. He had anticipated anger or fear, even a desire to leave. But instead, Amanda was opening up in a way he hadn't expected, revealing her own vulnerabilities. "Why didn't you tell me this sooner?" he asked, his voice softer than he intended. Amanda shrugged, her expression filled with shame. "Because I was scared. You're this successful, accomplished man, and I thought you'd see me as a failure, that you'd think I wasn't good enough for you." James's chest tightened at her words. He had been so consumed by his own insecurities that he hadn't considered hers. Amanda's confession wasn't about money. It was about trust. She had been carrying the weight of her struggles alone, too afraid to share them with him. "You're not a failure," he said firmly. "Everyone makes mistakes, Amanda. What matters is how you handle them. And I wish you had told me sooner. But I get why you didn't." Amanda's tears flowed freely now, but there was a glimmer of relief in her eyes. "I don't want to hide anything from you anymore, James. But I'm scared. Scared that with everything you're going through, I won't be enough to support you." James reached across the small table and took her hands in his. "Amanda, I've been so focused on my own doubts that I didn't see how much you've been carrying. This isn't about money. It's about us. And I don't want to lose you." Her lips trembled as she squeezed his hands. "I don't want to lose you either. But if we're going to make this work, there can't be any more secrets. Not from either of us." James nodded, his grip tightening on her hands. No more secrets. For the first time that night, a small, tentative smile appeared on Amanda's face. It wasn't much, but it was a start, a fragile step toward rebuilding the trust that had been shaken. As Amanda returned to the guest room, James remained in the study, his mind swirling with emotions. Her confession had shifted something within him. He had gone into this plan looking for answers, but now he wasn't so sure he wanted to hear them. The truth was more complicated than he had imagined, and the lines between right and wrong were blurring. The following morning, James woke to the smell of freshly brewed coffee wafting through the penthouse. The house was unusually quiet, yet there was a tension in the air that made every sound sharper, every movement more deliberate. James sat up in bed, rubbing his eyes, his thoughts immediately turning to the events of the previous night. Amanda's confession had been unexpected, a moment of raw honesty that had left him shaken. He had spent hours replaying her words, trying to piece together what they meant for their relationship. He found her in the kitchen, standing at the counter, her back to him. She was dressed in a soft cardigan and jeans, her hair loosely tied back. The sunlight streaming through the windows illuminated her figure, making her appear almost ethereal. She didn't look up as he entered, her movements precise, as she poured herself a cup of coffee. "Morning," James said, his voice hesitant. "Morning," Amanda replied without turning around. Her tone was neutral, her words clipped. She took a sip of her coffee, still not meeting his gaze. James felt a pang of guilt. The distance between them was palpable, a chasm he wasn't sure how to bridge. He moved to the counter, pouring himself a cup of coffee and leaning against the edge. "Did you sleep okay?" he asked, searching for a way to break the tension. Amanda shrugged. "I guess," he sighed, setting his cup down. "Amanda, I know things have been tense lately, but I want to talk about what happened last night." Finally, she turned to face him, her eyes tired but resolute. "What is there to talk about, James? I told you the truth. Now it's your turn." James blinked, caught off guard. "What do you mean?" Amanda crossed her arms, her gaze piercing. "I've been thinking about everything, about your sudden bankruptcy, the way you've been acting, and something doesn't add up. There's something you're not telling me, isn't there?" His heart raced. She was sharper than he had given her credit for. He opened his mouth to respond, but hesitated, the words catching in his throat. Amanda's expression hardened at his silence. "That's what I thought," she said, her voice laced with disappointment. She set her coffee cup down with a sharp clink. "You don't trust me, do you? That's what all of this is about." "It's not that simple," James began, his voice rising in frustration. "Then make it simple," Amanda shot back. "Do you trust me or not?" James ran a hand through his hair, his frustration mounting. "It's not about trust, Amanda. It's about clarity. I needed to know if what we have is real." Amanda let out a bitter laugh. "So, what? You decided to test me? Is that what this is? A game to see if I pass your standards?" "It's not a game," James said firmly. "I've been burned before. People who said they cared about me, who claimed to love me, they all disappeared when the money wasn't there. I couldn't let that happen again. And you thought the best way to handle that was to lie to me?" Amanda's voice cracked, her anger giving way to hurt. "Do you have any idea how humiliating that is? To be tested like I'm some gold digger?" James stepped forward, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Amanda, please. It wasn't about humiliating you. I needed to know." Amanda shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "You needed to know. No, James, you needed control. You needed to manipulate me into proving something you should already believe. Love isn't about tests. It's about trust. And clearly, we don't have that." Her words hit him like a slap, the truth in them cutting deeper than he wanted to admit. He had thought his actions were justified, a necessary evil to protect himself. But now, standing in front of Amanda, he realized just how much damage he had done. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean to hurt you." Amanda wiped her eyes, her expression softening but still guarded. "Sorry doesn't fix this, James. You've broken something between us, and I don't know if it can be repaired." They stood in silence, the weight of their conversation hanging heavily in the air. Finally, Amanda turned away, picking up her coffee cup. "I need some time to think," she said quietly. "I can't do this right now." James nodded, his throat tight. "Take all the time you need." As she walked out of the kitchen, James felt a hollow ache in his chest. He had wanted clarity, but now he was left with more questions than answers. Had he misjudged Amanda? Had his own insecurities blinded him to the truth? Or had he been right to doubt her all along? He sat down at the kitchen table, staring into his untouched coffee. The house was eerily quiet again, the tension thick enough to choke him. For the first time in years, James felt completely untethered. His carefully constructed world was crumbling around him, and he wasn't sure if it could ever be rebuilt. The apartment was unusually quiet that night. James sat in the living room, absent-mindedly spinning an empty glass on the table, lost in thought. He knew he had made a mistake, but he wasn't sure if it was something he could fix. Amanda had retreated to the guest room, and the emotional distance between them felt greater than ever. The sudden chime of the doorbell startled him. He stood up with a sigh, heading for the door. When he opened it, Marcus stood there, his face a mix of concern and frustration. Without waiting for an invitation, Marcus stepped inside. "Marcus, what are you doing here?" "This isn't a good time," James began, shutting the door behind him. "Exactly why I'm here," Marcus replied, tossing his jacket onto a nearby chair. "You think you can keep stalling, but you're about to lose everything." James folded his arms, defensive. "I know I messed up, but I don't need a lecture right now." Marcus stepped closer, his voice low but firm. "You don't get it, James. Amanda is hurting. You think this is just about your stupid test, but the problem goes deeper than that. She's drowning in doubt and shame, thinking she's not good enough for you." James frowned, his tone sharp. "What are you talking about?" Marcus pulled an envelope from his pocket and dropped it onto the table. "I did some digging. I know you didn't ask, but I needed to understand what's really going on. Look at this." James picked up the envelope and opened it. Inside were financial documents detailing Amanda's struggles, credit card debts, personal loans, and a history of late payments. He stared at the papers in disbelief. "She didn't want you to see this," Marcus said, "because she's been trying to handle it on her own. She didn't want you to think less of her." James felt a wave of guilt crash over him. "Why didn't she tell me?" Marcus shook his head. "Why didn't you trust her? You're both trapped in your own fears. You, with your distrust, and her, with her insecurities about being enough for you." James let the papers fall onto the table, his mind racing. "So, what am I supposed to do now?" "Tell her the truth," Marcus said bluntly. "Stop trying to control the narrative and be honest with her. If you don't, you'll lose her." James ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. And what if she leaves? Then, at least you'll know you tried to do the right thing, Marcus replied. But if you keep going like this, you'll destroy the best thing you've ever had. Before James could respond, Amanda appeared in the hallway. Her gaze shifted between the two men, suspicion evident in her expression. "What's going on here?" she asked, her voice tense. Marcus sighed and stepped back. "Amanda, I think you deserve to hear this from James. He has something he needs to tell you." Amanda crossed her arms, her eyes narrowing as she turned to James. "Well, what is it?" James glanced at Marcus, who gave him a look that said it's now or never. He took a deep breath and turned to Amanda, his voice trembling. "Amanda, I lied about being bankrupt. It was a test to see if you were with me for the right reasons." The silence that followed was deafening. Amanda blinked, as if trying to process what she had just heard. "You lied? You made me think you'd lost everything. Just to test me." "Yes," James admitted, guilt heavy in his voice. "I didn't know how to trust you. I was scared of being used again." Amanda shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "And you thought this was the answer? That breaking my trust would prove something?" James took a step closer to her, his hands raised as if to plead. "Amanda, please. I know I messed up, but I didn't know what else to do." "Don't," she said sharply, holding up her hand. "Don't try to justify this. You didn't trust me, James. You didn't even give me a chance. How am I supposed to forgive that?" Her words hit him like a blow, and he stood frozen as she turned and walked back down the hallway toward the guest room. The sound of the door closing behind her felt final, like the end of a chapter he wasn't ready to close. Marcus placed a hand on James's shoulder, his voice quieter now. "You did the right thing by telling her the truth. But it's up to her now." James nodded, his throat tight with emotion. He knew Marcus was right. Honesty was just the first step, and now he had to face the consequences of his actions. Amanda spent most of the night awake, sitting in the dim light of the guest room, her gaze fixed on the city skyline. The revelation from James felt like a weight she couldn't shake. The man she loved, the one she had trusted, had orchestrated a lie so elaborate it left her questioning everything. She didn't know what hurt more, the deception or the implication that she wasn't worthy of his trust. By the time the first rays of sunlight crept through the window, Amanda made a decision. She needed clarity, but not from James. She reached for her phone and dialed her sister, Claire, someone who had always been her voice of reason. The line rang twice before Claire's familiar, calm voice answered. "Amanda, it's early. Is everything okay?" Amanda took a deep breath, her words spilling out in a rush. "James lied to me, Claire. He pretended to be bankrupt just to test me, to see if I'd stay." Claire was silent for a moment, letting Amanda's words sink in. "That's a lot. I'm so sorry, Amanda. How are you feeling?" "Angry," Amanda admitted. "Hurt. But mostly I don't know what to do. I love him. But this feels like too much." Claire's voice softened. "It's okay to feel all of that. But let me ask you something. Do you think James did this out of malice, or was it out of fears?" Amanda hesitated. "Fear, probably. He's been hurt before, I know that. But does that excuse what he did?" "No," Claire said firmly. "It doesn't excuse it, but it might explain it. The question is, can you forgive him? And more importantly, can he change?" Amanda closed her eyes, leaning back against the chair. "I don't know." "Then give yourself time to figure it out," Claire advised. "You don't have to decide anything right now. Let him show you who he really is." Later that morning, Amanda stepped into the kitchen. James was there, sitting at the table, a cup of untouched coffee in front of him. He looked up as she entered, his eyes heavy with regret. "Morning," he said cautiously. "Morning," she replied, her tone guarded. She poured herself a cup of tea and sat across from him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Amanda broke the silence. "James, I talked to my sister this morning. She helped me put some of this into perspective." James sat up straighter, clearly nervous. And I realized that this isn't just about what you did. It's about why you did it," Amanda said, her voice steady. "You let your fear of being hurt guide your actions. But that fear doesn't justify breaking my trust." "I know," James said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've been thinking about it too, and I realize now how much damage I've done. Amanda, I'm so sorry. I don't expect you to forgive me overnight, but I want to fix this." Amanda studied him for a moment. "Fixing this means more than an apology, James. It means being completely honest with me from now on. No more lies, no more games. I promise," James said, his voice firm. "No more of that. I'll do whatever it takes to rebuild what I broke." Amanda nodded slowly. "Good. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that love isn't enough without trust. And right now, that trust is shattered." James swallowed hard, the weight of her words settling on his shoulders. "I understand. I'll do whatever it takes to earn it back." She stood, holding her mug tightly. "I need time, James. Time to figure out if this is something I can move past." He nodded, watching as she walked away. The sound of her footsteps echoed through the apartment, leaving him alone with his thoughts. That afternoon, Amanda left the apartment and went for a walk. The crisp air and the rhythm of her steps helped her think. She stopped at a small park, sitting on a bench near a fountain. Couples strolled by, holding hands, laughing together. It reminded her of how things used to be with James before the lie. She pulled out her phone, scrolling through photos of them. There was one from their first trip together, her favorite. They looked so happy, so carefree. Tears stung her eyes as she realized how far they drifted from that moment. She called her closest friend, Sarah, for advice. After hearing the story, Sarah's response was simple but impactful. "Amanda, you need to ask yourself, do you believe he can change? If the answer is yes, then it's worth trying. But if not, you need to walk away, for both your sakes." Amanda stayed in the park a little longer, thinking about Sarah's words. Could James change? Did she believe he was truly sorry? And could she find it within herself to forgive him? That evening, Amanda returned to the apartment. She found James sitting on the couch, holding an envelope. He stood as she entered, his expression a mix of nervousness and resolve. "Amanda," he began, his voice steady, "I know I hurt you, and I know words aren't enough. But I wrote everything down, everything I've been feeling, everything I wish I had said sooner." He handed her the envelope. She took it hesitantly, her fingers brushing against his. Without saying a word, she opened it and began to read. James watched her, his heart pounding as her eyes scanned the pages. When she finished, she folded the letter and looked up at him. Her expression was unreadable, but her voice was calm. "I need time to process this, James. I'm not ready to make a decision yet." "I understand," he said quietly. "Take all the time you need." As Amanda walked to the guest room, James sank back onto the couch, the weight of his actions pressing down on him. For the first time, he understood that this wasn't about fixing things quickly. It was about proving, through actions and not just words, that he could be the man Amanda deserved. The evening was calm, but the tension inside the apartment was palpable. Amanda sat on the couch, holding James's letter in her hands. She had read it twice already, each word sinking deeper into her heart. The honesty in his writing was evident, and she believed that he was truly sorry. But was an apology enough? She needed more than words. She needed to see him take real action. James sat at the dining table, his hands clasped together, stealing glances at Amanda as she sat in silence. Every moment felt like an eternity. Finally, Amanda set the letter down and looked at him. "James," she began, her voice steady but firm, "your letter was a start. But it's just that. A start. You broke my trust, and rebuilding it isn't something that happens overnight. James nodded, his expression filled with regret. I know, and I'm ready to do whatever it takes to make things right. Amanda leaned forward slightly, her hands resting on her knees. If we're going to move forward, there can't be any more secrets. No more half-truths, no more manipulation. If you want to earn my trust back, you need to be completely transparent. I promise, James said, his voice low but resolute. No more lies. No more games. I'll prove it to you. Amanda studied him for a moment, her gaze searching his face for any hint of insincerity. Finally, she let out a soft sigh. I still don't know if I can forgive you, James, but I know that I love you. And for now, that's enough for me to try. Relief flickered across James's face. Thank you, he said softly. I won't let you down. The following weeks were slow and cautious. Amanda and James navigated their relationship like walking on thin ice, carefully, unsure of when or if it might crack again. There were moments of hope, like when Amanda found herself laughing at one of James's jokes, or when James began opening up about his past betrayals in their conversations. But there were also moments of tension, where the weight of what had happened felt too heavy to bear. One afternoon, as they sat on the balcony overlooking the city, Amanda spoke up. James, do you realize that your distrust wasn't just about me? It was about how you see the world. James turned to her, nodding slowly. I've been thinking a lot about that. I've always felt like I had to protect myself, like I couldn't rely on anyone. But that mindset didn't protect me. It just pushed people away. Amanda rested her hand on the railing, her voice gentle but firm. I'm not those people who hurt you, James, and I never have been. But you treated me like I was. James looked at her, his expression heavy with regret. I know, and I'm sorry, Amanda. You didn't deserve that. She gave him a small smile, her gaze softening. We both have things to work on. I need to stop hiding my struggles, and you need to let go of your fear of being vulnerable. He reached for her hand, taking it in his. I'm ready to face those fears, Amanda, and I want to face them with you. She squeezed his hand, a flicker of hope warming her heart. Then let's take it one step at a time. Over time, Amanda also began to confront her own insecurities. One evening, as they were cleaning up after dinner, she broke the silence with a quiet confession. I never told you about my debt because I was scared. I thought if you knew, you'd see me as weak or irresponsible. James stopped what he was doing and turned to her, his expression serious. Amanda, nothing you say will ever make me think less of you. You're one of the strongest people I know. She let out a small, self-deprecating laugh. I don't always feel that way, but I'm starting to realize that hiding my flaws doesn't make me stronger. It just keeps people at arm's length. James walked over to her, placing his hands gently on her shoulders. We both made mistakes, Amanda, but I want you to know that I'm here, no matter what. You don't have to hide anything from me. Tears welled in her eyes, but this time, they were tears of relief. Thank you, she whispered, for saying that. He pulled her into a hug, and for the first time in weeks, they both felt like they were finally moving in the right direction. One weekend, James suggested they visit a nearby park for a change of scenery. As they walked along the winding paths, surrounded by trees and laughter from families nearby, Amanda stopped suddenly and turned to him. I still have doubts, she admitted, her voice steady but vulnerable. But I also have hope, and I think that's enough for now. James looked at her, his heart swelling with emotion. I have doubts too, about myself, but I know that with you by my side, I can become the man you deserve. Amanda smiled, her hand reaching for his. We'll figure out together. As they continued their walk, the weight of their past began to feel lighter. They knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long time, they were walking it side by side. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Amanda sat on the apartment balcony, her gaze fixed on the glowing city lights. There was a calmness in her heart she hadn't felt in weeks, a faint sense of hope that things might eventually be okay. Behind her, James stepped onto the balcony, carrying 2 cups of tea. He hesitated for a moment before sitting beside her. "May I join you?" he asked softly. She offered a faint smile. Of course. For a while, they sat in silence, the sounds of the bustling city below filling the space between them. Finally, James spoke, his voice steady but vulnerable. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about everything that happened. About us." Amanda turned to look at him, waiting for him to continue. "I realized I've spent so much of my life trying to control everything. My career, my relationships, even my emotions. I thought that by keeping control, I could protect myself. But all I did was push people away, including you." She nodded slowly, her expression contemplative. "I've been reflecting too. I've realized that my own insecurities kept me from being completely honest with you. I was so afraid of not being enough that I hid parts of myself, thinking it would make me seem stronger." James met her gaze, his voice softening. "You are enough, Amanda. You've always been enough. And I'm so sorry it took me this long to see it." Amanda took a deep breath, the tension in her shoulders easing. "Thank you for saying that. But rebuilding trust isn't something that happens overnight, James. It's going to take time, and it's going to take effort from both of us." James nodded, his face solemn but determined. "I understand. I know I can't fix this with words alone, but I want you to know I'm committed to doing whatever it takes. I've already started therapy to work on my issues with trust and control. I want to be better, not just for you, but for myself." Amanda blinked, surprised by his admission. "Therapy? Really?" He gave a small, hesitant smile. "Yeah, I figure it was about time I stopped running from my own fears." She felt a flicker of admiration for him. "I'm proud of you for taking that step. I've been thinking about doing the same. If we're going to make this work, I think we both need to focus on healing as individuals first." James reached out, taking her hand in his. "I agree. And I want you to know I'm here for you, no matter what." Amanda looked at their hands, and then back at him. "I don't know if I'm ready to forgive everything just yet, James. But I do know that I love you. And for now, that's enough to try." Relief washed over James, and he squeezed her hand gently. "That's more than I could ask for. Thank you, Amanda." Over the following months, Amanda and James worked diligently to rebuild their relationship. It wasn't easy, but they both showed a willingness to grow and face their challenges head-on. They began attending couples therapy sessions, where they learned how to communicate more openly and support each other's needs. They also created small rituals, like having distraction-free dinners, to focus on their connection. One evening, as they shared a quiet meal at home, Amanda decided to bring up a sensitive topic. "James, I've been thinking about my finances," she began cautiously. "I've been working on a plan to pay off my debt, but I think it's time we're completely transparent with each other about money." James set his fork down and gave her his full attention. "Thank you for telling me. I know how hard that must have been. I'm here to help in any way I can." She smiled, a mixture of relief and gratitude. "I was thinking we could see a financial advisor together, someone who can help us plan for the future." "I think that's a great idea," James said. "And I'd like to share more about my own finances with you too. I don't want money to ever come between us again." They spent the rest of the evening discussing their dreams and goals. For the first time, conversations about money felt like a way to strengthen their bond rather than a source of stress. One sunny afternoon, James and Amanda strolled through a park near their apartment. The sound of children playing and birds chirping filled the air. Suddenly, James stopped near a small pond where swans glided across the water. "Amanda," he said, turning to face her, "there's something I need to ask you." She tilted her head, curious. "What is it?" He took a deep breath, his hands trembling slightly. I know we've been through so much, but I also know that it's made us stronger. Amanda, will you give me the honor of renewing our commitment to each other? To starting fresh, with no secrets and no doubts. Amanda felt her throat tighten with emotion. Tears welled in her eyes, but they were tears of joy. James, I would love nothing more. A broad smile spread across his face. This time, I promise to do things the right way. No tests, no lies, just us, building something real. She reached for his hands, squeezing them gently. We've both learned so much, and I know that. Together, we can face anything. As the months turned into years, James and Amanda continued to nurture their relationship. They stayed committed to their individual growth and supported each other in ways they never had before. Together, they volunteered at community shelters, deepening their connection through shared purpose. On quiet evenings, they often sat on their balcony, watching the city lights and reflecting on their journey. The scars of the past were still there, but they were a reminder of how far they had come. One night, under a blanket of stars, Amanda said, "I never thought I'd say this, but I'm grateful for what we went through. It taught us how to love better, how to be better." James smiled, pulling her close. "I feel the same, and I can't wait to see what the future holds for us." Together, they had proven that love, when nurtured with honesty and trust, could withstand any storm. Their story wasn't perfect, but it was real. And through vulnerability, growth, and commitment, James and Amanda had built something stronger than they ever imagined, a love worth fighting for. And now, I want to hear from you. Which part of this story touched your heart the most? Leave a comment and share your thoughts. And of course, if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more narratives like this. Each subscription helps us continue bringing exciting stories to you. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.